The sounds of the prayer tower echoed in my room. My eyes opened. I've been in country for several weeks. It had almost become my alarm clock. Today, the guy chanting the Quran had a beautiful voice. I didn't understand the words, but it deeply touched who I was. I stood up and walked over to the bathroom and flipped on the light and looked up and realized I needed a haircut. This was in the past. Now back home, this wouldn't have been a big issue. I would have got my car, gone down to my guy, and got a haircut. But here I was a soldier. Here I didn't understand the language, and everybody knew why I was there. So this presented somewhat of a challenge. I finished getting dressed and I walked over to the door and opened it up, and I was bombarded with a sense of heat and humidity. And for a moment, I want you to imagine if you got fully dressed, turn on your shower on hot, and just walked into it. All the way down. Bad. Okay? So that's the kind of heat we were dealing with. When I stepped out, I turned to go down to the end of the building, and as I turned the corner, I was gifted with a sight of a sea of black, hungry, lean desert cats. Hundreds of them. They're on top of our vehicles and laying in the parking lot and erupting from the trash cans. So I reached out to my contact a few days prior to it, and I asked him, I was like, what's this about? And he said, there's a local legend that a man on a certain day at a certain time will get scratched on the heel. And when he does that, it will usher in the paradise that is to come. So nobody wanted to be responsible for killing paradise. So the cats were left unchecked. So as I started to go down the street, I want you to imagine like Moses in the Red Sea. The cats just... And as I looked back, I noticed they were filling in behind me. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a world where hundreds of cats are following you. It's a little disconcerting. But as I continued to walk, they gradually kind of slipped back. And I took in my surroundings. This area had seen violence for decades. The buildings were like broken and cracked, almost like you could see the bones through the skin.
Wow.
But there was still life. There were shops. There was a guy having tea. There were children playing in the street. As I walked, I'm an observer of people. And I looked around, and I took notice. Back here, I'm a white guy. A vanilla backdrop to the world. There, I was a white face in a sea of brown. I was an outsider. And I could feel curiosity. I could feel apathy. I could feel hostility. I never felt that here. And it was life-changing for me because it allowed me to have a little bit more empathy for people here, to know maybe what that felt like. I look over as I continue to walk, and there's a kid standing on the side of the wall, and he's got his arms crossed. Yeah, there's a mic there. And he's kind of tracking me with his eyes as I walk over. And I walk up to him, and like any good person that doesn't understand the language, I smile really big, and I walk up to him, and I make the universal sign for haircut. And I say, Salam, hello. And he kind of looks me up and down, and then he has a big grin that comes on his face. And he starts taking off, and he's like, yalla, yalla, let's go. So he takes off running, and I'm following behind him, and I can see him, and every couple minutes, he's like looking back to make sure I'm with him. We end up in front of this building. He points, gives those scissors, Shukran. Thank you. And as I turn and I look at this building, back here we paint things to renew them. The layers of paint on this wall were thick, almost like covering up the wounds that had happened to this building over time. When I looked down at the doorway, the doorknob was kind of like a worry stone that we grow up with as kids. Shiny, smooth, as if 1,000 people had touched it. I reached down and gave it a turn, kind of popped the door, and I was greeted by the sight of dirt. The entire floor was dirt, packed down over, I'd say, hundreds of years, but also like somebody had taken a wheelbarrow, just walked to the corner, and it made no sense. When I looked off to the left, I noticed a couple things that stood out. There was a barber's chair and a bright silver shelf put into the wall, pristinely clean. On that silver shelf, a set of scissors, a straight razor, and a comb. No electricity. Standing next to that was a man that I could almost say was ancient. He was hunched, balding on his head, a little gray to his eyes. His skin, as if he had seen too many days out in the desert, dark. His fingers gnarled with like arthritis. And he just stood there, looked at me, and he's like, so I go and sit down, and there's no conversation to be had. So I'm just kind of like, you know? So he takes his fingers, and he puts them into his scissors, and he goes to work. And for an hour, he cuts my hair almost hair by hair. He brings it up with a masterful hand, but slow, for almost an hour. Then he takes it, puts the stuff up, and he begins to clap my shoulders. This does not happen here. And then he starts massaging my neck, massaging my head. I wish that happened here. But for like another 10 minutes. So we're like an hour and 15 in. And then he steps back, he makes a gesture. So I reached in my pocket to pull out my wallet to pay him, and I realized when I looked inside, I didn't have any local money, I'd spent it. But I had a $20 bill, US. And I thought, okay, back home, it's about what I pay for a haircut. I'm gonna go ahead and give it to him. So I pull it out, I go to give it to him, and he takes his hand. No, really upset. I'm like, oh no, how am I gonna pay for this? And I was like, no, please, I'm trying to explain to him. I was, please take it. No. And so I kind of reached out to his hand, and I was like, right? And he took his hand, and he closed it, and he looked at me, and I'm like, oh no. And then he began to shake. And then he began to cry. So I felt bad, and I went to go hug him, and I started crying. And then I was like, why are we crying? So a few minutes goes by of this, and he steps back, and he looks at me, and he just goes, shukran, 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 over and over and over. And I'm awkwardly like, shukran, right? And I leave, and as I'm heading out, I'm like, I'm gonna have to call my contact and figure out what just happened. So I go back to our flat, and I come in, and I call him up, and I said, hey, I just had this interaction with this barber. There was crying, it was blocked. And I said, can you tell me what happened? And I said, I didn't have any money, so I gave him $20. And he said, huh, US? And I said, yeah. And he goes, you made him rich. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, your haircut here is about 5 cents. You just gave him 6 months' wages. I said, how the hell do you change a life for $20? So I said, hey, thanks, I appreciate it, and got off, and I called my guys, and I said, while we're here, everybody goes there.
Wow.
So a few months goes by, I come home, and I brought him with me, that story. And I realized I can't change the world. It's too big. I can't do it. But I can change the world for one. Earlier we heard in our story, someone shared a kindness and they felt seen. And that can be something as simple as one of us just saying, hey, you look nice today. Or hey, thanks for being here. It can be so far as like I heard somebody on Facebook that needed $200 to fix her car because she couldn't get to work, her parents were down. Could be lying, could be not. So I turned around and I paid for it. I don't have lots of money, I did that. It changed her life. I remember when $20 for me when I was on food stamps might as well have been $2 million. And so if I can leave you with anything, we're all playing in the same game. We're all going back in the same box. But while we're here, let's walk together. Let's serve each other. And just remember that a small kindness can change a life. Thank you.